All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order at 7:01. Could everybody rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Did everyone have an opportunity to look at the minutes from our last meeting?
Yep. Motion to approve the minutes.
Second. Andy and John? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Great. This sort of ties into new business, but I'll just mention that our last meeting was canceled because I was busy doing some things in the background, which I'll talk about under new business. But our next meeting will be as scheduled for March 9th. So I appreciate your patience, and certainly, we want to keep things moving, but we were doing some things behind the scenes to work on our budget and with our environmental consultants. So with that in mind, John, did you want to just give the brief update on VHB?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We have a signed contract from VHB, and it's been signed by Irene, so it's in motion.
Great.
And it's task 1 and 2.
Great. Just task 1 and 2. Right. And just as a reminder, those tasks fall within our present budget for this year. So I'll also note that there was some correspondence that came from the state consistent with Amy's presentation to us about when the next round of grants are coming due. And so those came out right as she said they would in February, and they'll be ready for submission in April. So we're hopeful that they'll be able to submit those and we can get that going. One thing I wanted to mention while we're talking about the environmental consultant, just bear with me. Two things. Can you continue to, John and your subcommittee, or John, you, continue to be our committee's point of contact with Amy and her group? Okay. I also spoke to the First Selectman's office about the appropriate contacts for them. They believe it would be Jim Ventris, and any legal questions could go through the First Selectman's office. So to the extent that member Amy said that she normally works with a town planner and an attorney, short of us having those resources just for our agency at this point without a developer, I confirmed with the First Selectman that those would be the two go-tos for her should she need. And obviously, I'm able to assist and point her in the right direction or get the answers. You and your subcommittee can certainly do that, but I wanted there to be particular points of contact that she could contact. So could you let her know that that's where we see things?
Yep.
Great. The other thing that I'd like to mention to Amy, and again, I can do it myself or through you, John, one of the, and it may be premature, but I'm putting it out there. One of the landowners in the area of where some of the testing might be done mentioned to the First Selectman's office that there were some concerns about the environmental study including all runoff locations. And there's apparently a statute. I'm not aware of what statute that is. The landowner just wants to make sure that this is done thoroughly. Maybe it hadn't in the past. I'm not sure because that property abuts the site. So if we could, I'm sure Amy knows what this is and how, and sure. In particular, where the testing would go. And again, it may be premature, but there was a concern about some runoff locations.
You know which property?
I do. I'll share it with you afterwards. I'm not sure if that information specifically was to be shared. So okay. I'm just keeping it in confidence right now, but I'm confident that Amy knows about this, but I just wanted to mention it while it was fresh. Questions on the environmental consultant at this juncture? I have to just say, I feel like we got that up and running really quick, considering all, the how much was involved with that. Questions? Okay, great. I'm moving through our business items because we do have a presentation coming up and I want to give our presenter as much time as possible. Next steps budget update. So this is one of the things that I was working on after our last meeting. I had the opportunity to meet with the Board of Selectmen to explain some of our budget items, our lofty goals, if you will, for fiscal year '24 and beyond. So at this point, the Board of Selectmen is, they like the fact that our environmental consultant is doing things in tiers, and that we're going to essentially wait and see how that process shakes out to see what money we're able to get from the state to help us with those assessments. We talked obviously about the TIF costs and how basically what they were saying is that as you need money, come to us, is at least for this year. Next year is sort of a wild card for us because we're a work in progress. So, but I had a nice conversation with them just explaining what our thought process was and how, as an agency that meets twice a month for 3-4 hours, and all of us having other jobs or, other obligations, going to be very difficult to be project managers, especially without a developer. So and it seemed to me that the Board of Selectmen understood where our concern was. And again, it may be premature to think about that, but I was saying this is going to be labor intensive, and we can't lay it all on Linda and Jim to do, or, our town council. This is going to be something that is, as we proceed with this project, is going to be something that needs to be re-examined. Questions, thoughts about that? Randy, you happened to be in that meeting. Did you have any additions?
No, I thought it went well. I mean, obviously, they're looking at a lot of money from a lot of different boards and agencies, so
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to see what we get.
Yep, exactly. Next steps are obviously going to be guided. I think that we're doing, as we've talked about, in terms of putting together a next step list. I think we're right where we're supposed to be right now. We're doing the things, and I expressed this to the board, that we are doing the things that our townspeople had expressed that they wanted to have more information about. And to me, that's the most critical at this point. We need more information about the land. The only thing that I didn't talk to the Board of Selectmen about, and we can talk about it maybe at our next meeting or the meeting after, is doing another land value assessment. To the extent Amy might not even need that. She had mentioned that that's something that she might need. So we might want to talk about, costs associated with that and the benefits of doing so. I think that would be very helpful to know and get an update on.
You mean like an appraisal? of the
Appraisal,
property?
yeah.
I did pull the current assessment of the new card on the property,
Okay.
yeah, and I was surprised it's pretty high.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is, so explain to us, Jackie, this is something that you got off of
Right on the town website.
the town website?
Yes.
I'm just gonna also ask folks to speak, so folks at home have said that they can't hear us, but
Okay, I'll talk loud.
I can hear you fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the 1 Main Street, which is the garage annex, and which is 1.5 acres,
Okay,
is appraised at 1.325. I don't know what it was appraised for previously. I didn't pull that. I didn't have access to that card.
right,
Okay.
Okay.
With an assessment of 927.5, and then the town hall building, which is 7 Main Street. When you add them both together, they're 2.75 acres. The town hall is appraised at 688.2, with an assessment of 481. I know that Mr. Bogan keeps asking about that.
yeah,
I mean, that's with all the new assessments that's been going through town. We've all been receiving notifications about that on our
Yeah.
own properties.
sure. And this is something that you got off the town website?
Yeah, you just go to the
Yep, okay,
vision appraisal.
right, vision appraisal, right, okay. Interesting. Things have changed
Yes.
in the last 4 or 5 years that we had it done. All the more reason why we would want to have another appraisal done. I think it's ripe. So we just have to, and maybe you could give us some guidance as to who might in town, and might be able to do that for us.
Okay, I can look into that.
Thank you. And, of course, we can go back to the appraisal that was done in the past and get that person, but something in me tells me I want just somebody fresh to take a look at it.
Absolutely. Timing there's too much gaps in time too, so something current by another opinion.
Yep, absolutely. Questions, thoughts on that? Okay. Is there any other new business, old business, things that people wanted to talk about?
There's one thing I want to bring up.
Of course.
I just want to make kind of do an assessment of where we are, and then make a couple of observations, maybe some things we could consider. I looked at the time horizon we're in. Seems like we're moving forward. We're accomplishing a lot of things. Particularly, I want to comment about the environmental subcommittee. That group got together. You all did a lot of work, and it just happened, right? All the people that were involved made it real good. I also noticed during the last meeting, and this is purely on my own experience, when I was on the Board of Finance, there were full-time people there that we could ask for assistance, and they would get it done, and we would talk about it at our next meeting.
Right.
It appears that this group, and like many of the other groups that are in our town, or agencies or committees, we got to do we got to do the heavy lifting on our own. And my thought is, and I say it mainly because of the success, and I can actually defer to my former board member, well, I was a former one, but current board member, Harvey Thomas. We went into a number of committees. We set up these committees in advance and did a lot of work off-site. And as a result, a lot of work got done. So for instance, we did financial policies. Harvey and I worked on it together, separate from being on the finance board. And we achieved quite a bit, brought it back, and it was the general board that looked at it. And so what I'm proposing is maybe a consideration to form some committees. Maybe we have to put some thought into which ones are necessary, and having all of us kind of go there. Now, at the same time, I also watched, I was one of them. I watched as you were asking for volunteers for one of the last committees, and like most of us were putting our heads under the table. And I think that might be because of the commitment that we have right now. We meet twice a month. My suggestion is maybe to give those committee members more time, consider meeting once a month and allowing the committee members to meet together, individually. And by the way, for the townspeople that are watching or listening, I'm not talking about private meetings. These would all be public meetings, just as this meeting is right now. It just would be more particular to the issue that would be at hand.
Do you have a sense, though, maybe you can just mention it, because I've given this a lot of thought. I know Annie and I have talked a little bit about, different facets of the project that need to get done. Have you given any thought as to what the subcommittees would look like right now? Because I think in my mind it's hard to pinpoint, like, this committee is going to work on charrettes, or this committee is going to work,
There might be just to do some of the legwork
Right.
off-site, and then bring it to this board or this agency to really embrace. So there might be a financial committee, and that committee would be looking at charrettes or looking at other aspects of finance-related stuff. There might be a liaison committee. I know I brought up, we ought to be calling the state or the other towns of Haddam, for instance. Maybe there's a liaison group. In the finance board, there were several other committees. We have, what do we have today? We have a communications committee where that group got together and they wrote articles that you would see in the East Haddam News all the time. And it was their efforts that moved these things forward. We worked on the financial policies. And the others that were there escaped me, Harvey, if you could recall. But we could come up with these other committees that I think would make sense. And there doesn't need to be 10 of them. There might be just 3 or 4.
Sure.
But that would be the general direction where we go. And then each member, maybe one member leads that committee and the others just contribute, and then meet once a month.
Yeah. Thoughts?
I think that that's a good idea, but I think we need a little bit more time to stew on that, to identify that. I think they have to be task-oriented like the environmental was. It's like they had a specific, let's sit down and talk to these people and figure out the right thing. So I think everything needs to be sort of
I completely agree.
mission-oriented, task-oriented, not ongoing or open-ended, and we can mix and match as we need to as we go forward. So I think that's probably a good topic to put on the agenda for another meeting at some point. Figure out
Which ones we need.
Which
I don't know the answer to that question. That's why I'm just totally
No, I think
open
that's
to the idea. I'm just saying, if we could divide the workload and give us, free up a little time, maybe some of us might be more willing to volunteer to be on these subcommittees and do that extra legwork, but then come to this board and bring a product like the environmental group did. When you came to the board, it was already vetted out, done. We just got a briefing that had already been seen, and we all agreed to it unanimously.
Yeah, and as you point out, especially without staff that have the time and the resources and, you know, again, I'll go back to the mission to support us. I think we're gonna have to be self-supportive, and I think that that's gonna be an important aspect of getting the funding that we need going forward. You know, when we show that we're making progress and working hard, doing our own thing, I think it's gonna be a little bit, it's gonna go a long way to showing everybody how committed we are to this process and making progress.
So you're thinking like we need more beef to sink our teeth into before we can really say what we're gonna eat?
Well, I think.
Or
I-
vegan.
Yeah.
That's just an expression.
Well, I think we've heard a lot from our townspeople too, even from the beginning, like, what's the plan? What are your, what's the direction? And to Bill's point, I think that if we can put some goal-orientated committees together and think on that and maybe put it, and our homework would be between now and our next meeting on May 4th, really think about that, and I can put it on the agenda item, like, what does everybody see as some objectives that we want to form committees on? Harvey, did you have something?
Yeah.
Yes, recognizing that I'm only sort of here in a liaison capacity, I'm going to take the opportunity to run my mouth for a minute. The big lesson that I took home from the gentleman from Windsor was that doing this is, although in the context of Greenwich or whatever, it's small potatoes, but for us, it's sort of big potatoes and fairly complex. More complex maybe than we have, with all due respect, within this group to manage. And what I took home was the idea that you really would be we as a town would be well served to think about finding someone who has successful experience at managing this kind of thing. And we could, again, with all due respect, we could sit here and debate for a couple of meetings. We need a committee to do this and a committee to do that. But you don't really know what that committee ought to be doing unless you have some expertise. And so I'm advocating, I guess would be the right verb, that the group gives some serious thought to identifying, thinking about, agreeing or disagreeing that a project manager with experience in doing this kind of thing on this kind of scale. You don't need the guy who works in Manhattan. You need the guy who works on relatively small projects, but has been good at it.
There's our first
Otherwise,
committee.
otherwise we're gonna, I'm afraid, we're gonna, and Bill is exactly right. We made some really good progress at the Board of Finance by breaking up some tasks and assigning them to subcommittees. But we kind of knew what we wanted when we started. And I'm not sure we know what we want a subcommittee to do. Yeah, pretty straightforward to define that you needed some more environmental stuff done. Okay, what's next? What order should you do the steps in? Who are the people who have expertise? I'm the project manager and I know we ought to get this guy because he's crackerjack at this, and we ought to get that gal because she's crackerjack at that to come and help us. But I'm afraid we're going to have subcommittees with no chart to follow and could easily run into Bartlett's Reef in the Long Island Sound.
I agree with that, yet at the end of the game, we're still gonna need to do the committees.
I don't disagree with that at all. I'm just arguing for someone to help us
Kind of shepherd us.
understand what committees, what they should do, how they should proceed, and where they can reach out to for expertise. I've overspoke my time.
I don't think you have it all, actually.
I don't either.
And it's one of the things that I've explored with the first selectman's office, and for right now, they're not inclined to necessarily budget us for that. Recognizing that even having a part-time person, like, let's call Pat McMahon, let's see what Pat thinks about this, and let's have him come in and tell us what our next step should be, and you should have a committee on this. I mean, that would be perfect. And like a per diem cafeteria, remember we had talked about like plucking out what we might need? I don't really get the sense, we can certainly create a committee, a project management committee, to say, okay, this is what we need from this person, and officially ask for the money that might be associated with that. Or I could just call Pat, somebody who has that experience, say, give me a sense of like what you charge an hour, you know, to call you and say, like, wait, can you come down and give us a presentation on what committees we might need?
I'm not advocating for a full-time,
We don't need a full-time, right? But like somebody that we can, like an advisor at this point, right?
but.
A consultant. Yeah.
But now I got on this hand and on this hand. From the perspective of sitting on the Board of Finance and having to write property tax checks on my own account, I don't want to see the town blowing money out the door for no good reason.
Right.
On the other hand, like the economist on one hand, on the other hand, if we mess this up, it's going to be
Right. We have to do it.
not only embarrassing for the people who did it, but a terrible tragedy for the town 50 years into the future. So penny wise and pound foolish should be my, I guess, closing thought.
But no pressure.
No, just to go with this, my thought process, we're in alignment, and my thought process is I wanted to open up this conversation to say, all right, we're gonna have to do more work as a board to do some of these things. That means subcommittees. We do meetings twice a month, which is quite a bit of time. I'm just suggesting that we just reallocate some of that time more toward committees so we could get some of this work done and have some forward progress. And to include that reach out to maybe, maybe we do just reach out to Pat and say, okay, for a set fee, can you give us an outline of the 10 things that we ought to do? And we'll pay you by the hour. We could probably squeeze that in our existing budget if need be, right?
Right.
I just want to get some progress here, and you're right, we definitely need a little bit of, it would be nice to have a little hand-holding to save us a lot of time and probably getting us in the right direction. I just didn't think the town, as you said, has the appetite to spend for somebody to come in and do that at present.
Right.
Is it possible, as we get a little further down the road, it'll become more obvious where we need that expertise?
Yes.
When we used to develop new systems where I worked, it was overwhelming. They'd come to you and say, all right, we need this, we're gonna need it in 6 months. It's gonna have to touch all these different areas. Overwhelming, but we would sit down, whiteboard, how we were gonna break it down into what pieces, and then all of a sudden you're like, ooh, that's manageable.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of goes to where you're coming from, Bill. If we set our goals and set up some silos and figure out who's gonna do them and take those pieces, and then we bring the experts in for each of those pieces, all of a sudden it becomes more manageable.
Yeah.
And if we need a project manager,
Yeah.
then we'll know at that point.
Yeah.
And for that matter, I want to point out, I look at all the extra work that you're doing as the chair of this, you probably need some support from some of us to work on this too.
And you've all been, and I've been delegating to the best that I can. No, you've all been great, but
But
you're right,
no,
it's
but
going to get more labor
I see a lot of the
intensive.
energy that you put in.
Yeah.
And it's just not like we don't have a full-time person here just to delegate, so I see you
Yeah.
just running with it.
Right.
And it would be pretty good to maybe delegate some administrative stuff out.
Yeah.
That's kind of just where I'm going is.
Sure.
And the cost would be not meet twice a month.
Right.
And that's the part that I'm saying is
Yeah.
that I feel like we meet a lot
Yep.
and we could probably get a lot done meeting once a month as long as we were getting some stuff done in
Right.
advance.
My fear, though, with that is that
I know.
we're gonna fall behind, or you'll have a sense that you have a little more time, so, I'll put that phone call off till tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or if I know I'm meeting next week, I
Right.
gotta get this done.
That's why you have a chair who's gonna,
But maybe a
whip.
little further down the road, once a month is the right thing, but I think right now, we just
Yeah.
have so many moving parts.
well, at least for the next 3 meetings, we already have things scheduled.
Correct.
So we're looking at like April, but to Bill's point, I think I would like for our homework for our next meeting on March 9th to be, what committees, what tasks do you think that are necessary at this point that we can put into a subcommittee to investigate? Like Jackie, for example, who can do the appraisal, like the land committee, like, the appraisal committee or what have you.
It almost seems like we need a whiteboard session here, though,
Yeah.
with ourselves.
Yeah.
Right, that's
And
my,
just draw
that's
it
what
all
I'll
out.
do.
How we wanna map
we'll
this
bring
out.
that in for the 9th and strategize.
Great idea.
I mean, when I was in Canton Board of Selectmen, we did a total overhaul of our town charter, which was a 1.5-year project. And we just broke it up. We had subcommittees for every chapter of a town charter.
Wow.
And those subcommittees went and worked on their specific chapters. Our project manager was basically the town attorney, who of course has to read the entire document, but he explained what all the chapters had to be and kept us on task and that type of thing. So the two aren't mutually exclusive. To have subcommittees and a project manager, you probably
Yep.
need both, especially for something like this. You probably need both.
Yeah, we need an official point of contact at some point.
Yeah.
If we're not gonna have a developer doing that, we're gonna have to have somebody, a point of contact who, Amy can call and be like, okay, yes, we can do this, I'll work with Jim, or, we're gonna need that eventually, I think, yeah.
So you're suggesting a strategy session where
Yeah.
we sit down
Exactly.
and somebody
Yep.
just walks us through, here's the end state and how do we break it down to the.
Yeah.
Right, and it's, everything from, a park-like setting to, what the Centerbridge project was,
Yeah.
We'll figure out what those different components need to be, and then how we're gonna divide that up and move that forward.
To accommodate any of those things, because we still don't know.
Exactly.
When that would be.
Yeah.
Right. And it's we'll feel better about it, because we'll feel like, all right, now this is
Yeah.
manageable.
Right,
Right now, it's
Yeah.
all up in the air.
It is.
So again, I'm just planting that seed. I
Yeah.
wasn't say we gotta do it immediately.
No, no, no.
I'm okay with
important.
doing it down the road, but I do
I've-
feel like,
right,
and I was a little bit surprised, not surprised, I was just, maybe I've grown accustomed on the finance board, how much support was given, and I was like, oh, we gotta run with a lot of this on our own.
yeah,
And that was just my thought.
yeah. Well, at least the Board of Selectmen know now that it's gonna be very labor intensive. So when we talked about money for the next year. So they know if we make requests, for example, for that per diem person, project manager, consultant, advisor, whatever you call that person, that I've already planted the seed on that.
Good.
Yeah. Any additional thoughts on this? And Bill, did you have other things on your list? Okay.
Is there anything left in the budget? Or
We're
zero?
coming close to
What is close?
like another 5.
I mean, it seems that when we met with the different companies for the consultant work there, I mean, we had Tim Myjack came in, he was, the last one came in, he was just a wealth of information. Now, we went with VHB because we thought it was a really great fit.
Yeah.
And it is, but he was willing and mentioned it, that he would come in on okay, you need me to come in for 4 hours and talk about something? He would come in for 4 hours, get paid for that, and
Yeah.
that's it. No long-term commitment, no giant
Yeah.
contract.
Yeah.
And the Main Street fellow there, I can't think of his name.
Pat McMahon.
Pat, yeah, okay, deal. If we could get a couple of guys come in for a minimum amount of money just to talk about how do we get started with it?
Yeah.
And I don't think it's gonna cost us much, and I think
Yeah.
you're gonna see the common threads where,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
they've all agreed that we have to get going on these
Yeah.
2 or 3 things.
Right.
You know, so-
Yeah, I'm less concerned about the money where that's regarding.
I
but,
think that money's
you know,
plenty
and if we
for
have
what we're
like,
talking
proposals, for, like we did for the environment consultant, the TIF, that Board of Selectmen are expecting us to submit that for funding. So that's no,
So I
that's
think
no
we can get
surprise.
some advice very quickly and from a couple of different
Yeah.
positions so that we can kind of you know, see what different people think of the same thing and try
Yeah.
and come up with something common.
Okay, good.
All right.
Great. Anything else before we go to public comment? Mr. Bogan, did you want to be heard on
Oh,
any?
wow, I'd love to speak.
Okay, go for it.
Harvey, you got a good point. Project engineer, eat, sleep, think, we won't give many vacations, sick leave, or his heart will be in this village improvement. Thank you too for speaking up, because we got concerns on the video portion, people out there. And can we make Jim Curtin do a solo on the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yeah.
That was because I had a detour.
Yeah, there was an accident down the road,
Go
so.
behind me, because there was a big fire truck in
Last
the middle of the
meeting, we
road.
talked about arsenic. There was like
Car
arsenic, arsenic, arsenic.
There's a
and
car
no other
accident.
concern about anything else that's pollutants down there. It seems to be the main concern, and I feel this machine shop, which was a full-blown machine shop to construct this bridge, you're gonna find a lot of contamination around. I'm rolling the dice on that one, okay? It will reveal some heavy contamination. But I got the same backyard as the town. I got ledge, I got iron pockets, I got probably arsenic. I've been there almost 45 years. Drank the water, I still got 2 hands, 2 arms, 2 legs, perfect health, and I gotta live to 105 because I need to accomplish what I'm working on. It might be a little overemphasis on this, you know, I mean, I know there's issues with you know, mold, there's issues with asbestos, and here we go into this. But I just haven't read any obituaries that said arsenic is the cause of death these days. It's only my assumption. It's only a lot of people's assumption. And we might be beating this one up. But getting back to this meeting from last, this is something that's been haunting me. It's a requirement that we might have to have a developer. We're going to have to hold his hand, and he's going to have to walk along with us. That worries me. You know, I need to see, this is not a state law. Is it a suggestion? Is it a total obligation to have a developer on board? This was state property. They are the creators of probably most of this problem we're going to find. And we sure know it's not a state law, but can we sidestep this? You know, what if we don't develop it? I don't know. Ultimately, we got to do something with this property, and the town of East Adam and Moodus will ultimately decide its fate. You know, and I hope it's all in good faith. Concerning a developer, there's one only potential developer at this point in time. There's a lot of people don't agree with his plans. I'm telling you that from the general consensus of people that I talk to. And I don't want to go to the bar at closing time, you know, and have to make a decision, have a beer, and you hear the bartender say, okay, if you got them, drink them up, it's closing time. And you gotta look left, you gotta look right, and you look at the first developer you see, and we grab them. That's gonna be our downfall. That's gonna be our downfall. You know, you guys are working hard. You got good input. We gotta do something with this property. But, you know, I'm concerned about that. I need to see that in writing, that we have to have a developer. Because ultimately, I don't know, maybe the people want gardens there. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's best for this property. 100%. So where I've said in the past, that for sale sign is a very important thing. We give Jackie the listening, as a matter of fact. Give us a little deal on it and we'll list it with you. But that'd be kind of a conflict of interest. But, you know, we need to plant this seed. We need to make more people available. You know, it's gone by, what are we, 10 years into the original committee on this, you know? So everything takes time. We realize that. It's a slow-moving process. But we got to plant that seed. We got to put it up for sale. For sale, issues pending. You know, we need to attract some other people with some fresh ideas too. You know, and I think that will be our success point here. I said it all.
Wow, that was perfect.
I'm gonna bring my own time. How can we get that changed to 5 minutes? 4? Who came up with the 4 minutes?
So just 2 points of clarification. So the VRC was created in the fall of 2008, but
Was
there
it
had been some
2008?
studies that were done, I think, starting in 2004 about the property. So, and the second thing is, I think what you're saying is about we need the developer. I think what you're referring to is what Amy had mentioned is that it makes it easier to get grants if we have a developer on board. I don't think she's saying it's impossible. I don't think she would have taken on this project if she thought it was impossible, because she obviously knows we don't have a developer on board. So I remain, and I think our subcommittee remains cautiously optimistic that even without a developer, we'll get some funding. And Amy took it upon herself, and her company took it upon themselves to put a proposal together and, and offer their services, knowing that it might be tough, but not impossible to get that funding. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to get something. Am I speaking out of turn? Was there any?
Yep.
I
Okay.
agree with you.
She had
Okay.
very similar projects right across the river
Right,
with great outcomes in terms of getting
right.
grant and funding from the state.
But I don't think to your concern though, I don't think it's a requirement that we
Yeah.
have a developer on board to get money.
Okay, she kind of left us with that impression.
Yes, so. Okay, good.
Just one other question.
Sure.
Have we got an updated value on this land yet?
No, that's what we were talking about earlier. We're working on that.
Okay. all right.
Yep.
I'm
I think it makes sense to get that.
sorry. Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. I'm sorry if I missed that.
No, it's fine. So at this point, I'd like to entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of a presentation by Jim Demesis, who's traveled all the way from the good old state of Maine to be with us tonight. He's with Camoin Associates, and there will be no motions taken in this executive session. It's for purposes of Jim presenting a proposal that was submitted to our committee for the TIF RFP in response to the TIF RFP. So I'd like to invite Jim, obviously, into our executive session to present. Ruth, would you like to stay? Yes. Okay, and Harvey, would you like to stay and join us for the conversation? That would be great. Is there a motion?
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions, opposed? Great. Also, I just want to say too that I don't expect there to be any substantive conversations after our executive session, but to the extent that there are, we will restart the video. But I don't expect that. We will adjourn immediately following.
You didn't ask me.